Albert Camus sets the plague in the quiet Algerian town of Oran, a place so ordinary that nothing about it seems capable of producing tragedy. The people are busy, practical, focused on business, habits, and small pleasures. They are not evil. They are not cruel. They are simply distracted by the routines of daily life. This is what makes Oran dangerous. Camus believed that most catastrophes do not arrive with thunder. They arrive with small disruptions that are easy to ignore. A few dead rats in the streets, a strange smell, an unusual pattern, something that feels wrong but not urgent. The citizens of Oran notice the rats at first with mild curiosity, then annoyance, then unease. But they do not change their lives. They do not imagine that these small signs might mean something larger. They return to their cafes, their work, their conversations. Normality is a powerful drug. Camus shows how people cling to routine because it protects them from fear. If life continues to look ordinary, then perhaps it still is. The human mind resists the idea that everything can change at once. It prefers denial to panic. When the plague first appears, no one wants to name it. The word itself feels too heavy, too historical, too final. Doctors hesitate, officials delay, people tell themselves it will pass. Camus understood this instinct. To acknowledge catastrophe is to lose the illusion of control. As long as the plague is just an anomaly, life can continue. But once it is named, everything must change. Oran's tragedy does not begin with death. It begins with disbelief. This is Camus's first lesson. Human beings do not fall into disaster because they are blind. They fall because they do not want to see. The plague, in Camus's vision, is not just a disease. It is whatever threatens to interrupt our comfort, expose our fragility, and remind us that nothing is guaranteed. We resist it not because we are foolish, but because we are afraid, and fear prefers illusion to truth. As the plague spreads through Oran, something strange happens. Even as the number of deaths increases, people continue to behave as though life will soon return to normal. Shops stay open, appointments are kept, plans are made, weddings are scheduled. There is a stubborn insistence that the disaster is temporary. Camus believed that this reaction was not stupidity. It was self-defense. To truly accept what is happening would mean admitting that the future has been stolen, that tomorrow no longer belongs to you, that life is no longer predictable. This is a kind of psychological death, and most people cannot face it all at once. So they bargain with reality. They tell themselves the plague is exaggerated. They blame the authorities. They look for reassuring statistics. They believe that if they remain calm, if they continue their routines, the threat will somehow lose its power. But the plague does not care about routines. Camus uses this phase of denial to show how deeply human beings rely on the idea of control. We want to believe that if we do the right things, life will behave. That if we plan carefully enough, tragedy will stay away. The plague exposes how fragile this belief is. When Oran is finally sealed off from the outside world, the illusion collapses. No one can leave. Families are separated. Lovers are cut off from one another. Time itself begins to feel different. Days stretch. The future becomes blank. This is the moment when the town realizes that it is no longer in charge. Camus believed that this experience, sudden collective vulnerability, reveals something fundamental about human life. We live as though tomorrow is promised, even though it never is. The plague strips that illusion away, and once it is gone, people must decide how to live without it. One of the cruelest effects of the plague in Oran is not death, but separation. When the city is closed, people are cut off from those they love. Wives are separated from husbands, children from parents, lovers from one another. Letters stop, travel ends, the world shrinks to a single infected town. Camus believed this was one of the deepest forms of suffering. To be separated from those you love is to experience a kind of exile. You are not physically imprisoned, but emotionally stranded. You cannot touch. You cannot comfort. You cannot even know how the other person is truly doing. Time becomes unbearable. When the future is blocked, every moment stretches. Days lose their shape. Weeks blur. The plague turns time into something heavy and oppressive. People do not live. They wait. Camus uses this to show how human beings need connection, not just for happiness, but for identity. Without the presence of others, even our own lives begin to feel unreal. The plague makes everyone a stranger in their own life. You wake up each day and nothing moves forward. There is no progress, no arrival, just the same fear repeated. Camus believed that this was a powerful metaphor for modern existence. Even without a disease, many people live in emotional exile, cut off from meaning, from belonging, from hope. The plague simply makes this visible. At the center of the plague stands Dr. Bernard Rieux, a man who does not offer philosophy, comfort, or false hope. He offers something simpler and harder: work. While others argue about what the plague means, Rieux treats the sick. He moves from patient to patient, day after day, knowing that many will die anyway. Camus believed Rieux was his moral ideal. Rieux does not believe the plague is just. He does not believe it is deserved. He does not believe it will be redeemed. He fights it anyway. This is Camus' ethics in action. In a world without meaning, duty does not come from God or destiny. It comes from the presence of suffering. When someone is dying in front of you, something must be done, even if it changes nothing in the end. Rieux does not see himself as a hero. He sees himself as a man doing his job. Camus believed that this quiet decency was more important than any ideology. You do not need to believe in a better future to help someone now. Rieux knows he will lose. He knows he cannot save everyone, but he also knows that not trying would be worse. The plague, for Camus, is not defeated by optimism. It is resisted by persistence. Jean Tarrou is one of the most morally complex characters in The Plague. He is not a doctor. He does not have to fight the disease, but he chooses to. Tarrou is haunted by a deep sense of guilt about the ways people participate in violence simply by living in society. He believes that everyone carries the plague inside them. By this, Tarrou means that cruelty, indifference, and complicity are part of ordinary life. We benefit from systems that hurt others. We remain silent when we should speak. We accept injustice because it is convenient. Tarrou wants to be innocent, but he knows innocence is impossible. Camus used Tarrou to express one of his deepest concerns. How can a person live ethically in a world built on harm? How can you avoid being a murderer, even indirectly? Tarrou's response is to resist wherever he can. He forms volunteer sanitary squads. He fights the plague not because he believes he can defeat it, but because he refuses to be part of it. Camus believed this was the true meaning of revolt, not purity, but effort. Raymond Rambert is a journalist trapped in Oran when the city is sealed. Unlike Rieux and Tarrou, he does not initially see the plague as his responsibility. He is in love. His wife is waiting for him outside the city. All he wants is to escape and return to her. To him, the plague is an accident that has stolen his private happiness. Camus gives Rambert this desire deliberately. Most people, Camus believed, are not heroes or villains. They are people who want to live their own lives. They want love, safety, and continuity. When catastrophe strikes, their first instinct is not to fight it, but to flee from it. Rambert spends much of the novel trying to escape Oran through illegal means. He bribes, he negotiates, he searches for ways out, and Camus does not condemn him for this. Rambert's longing is human. Why should he sacrifice his love for a plague he did not choose? But something slowly changes. As Rambert watches Rieux and Tarrou work without hope of reward, he begins to feel ashamed. Not because he wants to leave, but because he realizes that leaving means abandoning others to suffer alone. He recognizes that while his love is personal, the plague is collective. In the end, Rambert chooses to stay. Camus believed this moment was one of the most important in the novel. Rambert does not stay because he suddenly believes in heroism. He stays because he cannot bear to be happy while others are dying. He chooses solidarity over escape. This is one of Camus's deepest moral claims. To be human is to refuse to be happy alone. As the plague continues, something subtle but profound begins to change in Oran. At first, everyone experiences the catastrophe privately. Each person measures the disaster by what it takes from them personally: a loved one, a job, a sense of safety. But over time, the scale of the suffering grows too large to remain individual. Grief becomes shared. Fear becomes communal. Loss becomes a common language. Camus believed that this is how solidarity is born. When suffering becomes universal, it stops being isolating. No one can pretend anymore that what is happening is just bad luck or personal misfortune. The plague touches everyone, and in doing so, it exposes a hidden truth. Human beings are bound together whether they like it or not. People in Oran begin to look at one another differently. Strangers are no longer just strangers. They are fellow prisoners of the same catastrophe. A nod in the street, a glance in a hospital corridor, a quiet word between exhausted workers becomes a form of recognition. You are in this too. This does not erase fear or selfishness. Some people still hoard, betray, or retreat into themselves. Camus is honest about this. But alongside these impulses, another force begins to grow. A slow, stubborn willingness to endure together. Rieux, Tarrou, and the volunteers who join them are not driven by optimism. They do not believe the plague will soon end. They simply cannot accept doing nothing while others suffer. Their work becomes a shared rhythm: days of exhaustion, nights of despair, and mornings of quiet determination. Camus believed that this kind of solidarity was one of the few answers to the absurd, not a solution, but a stance. When the world is indifferent, people can still choose to care about one another. The plague reveals how fragile human life is. Solidarity reveals how strong it can be. As the plague drags on, the people of Oran begin to divide into two quiet camps: those who resist and those who resign. This division is not political or ideological. It is existential. It is about how a person chooses to live when faced with a reality that cannot be escaped. Some people give up inwardly. They stop caring. They perform their duties mechanically. They wait for death or for deliverance with the same numbness. Camus does not judge them harshly. Exhaustion and fear can hollow anyone out. But he shows what resignation does to a human being. It shrinks them. It drains their presence. It turns life into something that merely happens. Others refuse this inward collapse. Rieux, Tarrou, and the volunteers do not believe the plague will reward them. They do not expect gratitude. They do not even expect success. And yet they continue. They disinfect. They isolate. They treat the sick. They record the dead. Day after day, they act as though their efforts matter, even when the statistics say they do not. This is Camus's definition of resistance. Resistance is not optimism. It is not hope. It is not faith in a better tomorrow. It is the refusal to accept that nothing matters. Camus believed this refusal was the essence of revolt, not the kind that overthrows governments, but the kind that keeps a human being from becoming a ghost. To resist is to say, I will not let this make me indifferent. The plague is stronger than any individual. It kills without reason. It does not respond to courage or despair. But Camus shows that resistance changes something else. The people who practice it, they remain alive inside. In a world where death is everywhere, that inner life becomes a form of victory. Camus did not believe in saints. He did not believe in heroes. He believed in decency. In the plague, this is the quality that distinguishes Rieux, Tarrou, and the volunteers from the rest of Oran. Not brilliance, not courage, not moral purity, but the simple refusal to abandon others. Decency means doing what needs to be done because someone is suffering. Rieux never talks about ethics. He never makes speeches about justice. He just keeps showing up. He treats the sick. He listens to the dying. He fills out death certificates. He does his job even when he is exhausted, grieving, and afraid. Camus believed that this was the highest form of morality in an absurd world. Not grand ideals, but quiet persistence. When nothing is guaranteed, when no reward waits, when no final justice exists, decency is all that remains. You help because someone needs help. You care because someone is there. The plague exposes how rare this kind of decency is, and how powerful. It does not defeat death. It does not end suffering, but it preserves something human in the midst of it. Camus believed that this was the true victory. Albert Camus made it clear that the plague was not only about disease, it was also about something far more dangerous and far more familiar, the way evil spreads when people become indifferent. For Camus, the plague was a symbol of all the forces that dehumanize: war, fascism, cruelty, lies, and the slow erosion of conscience. He wrote the novel in the shadow of Nazi occupation. He had seen how ordinary people could become complicit in horror simply by obeying, looking away, or waiting for someone else to act. The plague in Oran behaves the same way. It does not begin with monsters. It begins with small failures to care. Camus wanted to show that catastrophe is rarely imposed only from outside. It grows inside societies when people become tired, fearful, or numb. The plague spreads through habits, excuses, and silence as much as through germs. This is why he refused to give the disease a single villain. There is no mastermind, no evil genius. The plague simply appears, and what matters is how people respond to it. Some collaborate with it by doing nothing. Some resist it by doing something. Camus believed this was the fundamental moral choice of modern life. The plague also represents the absurd itself, the random, indifferent force that shatters human plans. It does not care who you are. It does not negotiate. It simply arrives. And when it does, all the illusions of control fall away. What remains is character, how you act when nothing makes sense, how you treat others when nothing is fair, how you live when tomorrow is uncertain. That is what Camus wanted us to see. As the epidemic in Oran finally begins to recede, the city celebrates. The gates reopen. Families are reunited. The cafes fill again. Music returns. People pour into the streets, grateful to feel alive. But Camus ends the novel on a note that is deliberately unsettling. The plague is never gone. Rieux, who has watched too many die to believe in happy endings, reminds us that the bacillus can lie dormant for years. It hides in furniture, clothing, and walls. One day it will awaken again, not necessarily in the same form, but with the same destructive power. This is Camus's final warning. Evil, cruelty, indifference, and violence do not disappear when a crisis ends. They wait, they return, they adapt. Societies that believe they have conquered them become careless, and that carelessness allows the plague to rise again. Camus was not pessimistic about this, he was realistic. Human beings are fragile, power corrupts, fear makes people cruel. These conditions never vanish. What changes is whether people remain aware of them. The danger of relief is forgetting. When people celebrate survival, they are tempted to believe the danger has passed. Camus believed this was when the next catastrophe is already preparing itself. Memory fades. Vigilance weakens. The same patterns return. The plague is not only an event, it is a condition. To live is to live with the possibility that it will return. Albert Camus did not write The Plague to frighten us. He wrote it to remind us of something fragile and essential. What it means to remain human when everything around us is breaking. The plague does not test intelligence. It does not test faith. It tests character. When the world becomes dangerous, when death is close, when fear is everywhere, people reveal who they are. Some retreat, some exploit, some deny, but some choose something quieter and more difficult. They choose to care. Rieux does not defeat the plague. Tarrou does not purify the world. Rambert does not save everyone he loves. But together they create something that matters. They refuse to let suffering become normal. Camus believed this refusal was the only true form of heroism. Not the heroism of victory, but the heroism of persistence. You show up, you help, you treat the sick, you stand with the frightened. You do not pretend that everything is fine when it is not. In an absurd world, this is all anyone can do, and it is enough. The plague will return, cruelty will reappear, injustice will take new forms, but so will decency, so will solidarity, so will the stubborn human refusal to abandon one another. That is Camus's hope. Not that the world will be saved, but that people will continue to choose one another inside it. And that choice, renewed again and again, is what keeps the plague from having the final word.